Their Thanksgiving is a Monday for some reason.
All right.
Because everything's backwards up there. Ashley, let's go to the hotline. It's a day late, but better late than never to bring in the Texas High School Football Hall of Famer. It is, as he joins us every week, we're joined by the great Craig Way. Craig, I am so glad to hear that you have survived your trip to West Virginia.
Well, and it's left me pondering the question, Tep, do they on Canadian Thanksgiving eat turkey?
You know what? I don't know.
I have been to a Canadian Thanksgiving, and we did have turkey. It wasn't in Canada. It was with Canadians down here in Texas, but we did have turkey, so can confirm.
Is it a Canadian Thanksgiving if it happens outside of Canada?
There were a lot of Canadians, so I think so. Step can probably weigh in on this one.
They were just kind of taking their act on the road, and you guys were willing to oblige. So
exactly.
That's exactly right. Craig Way joins us, the Texas High School Football Hall of Famer. We are now into... I mean, it seems weird. It seems like, and I know that we always say this every year, oh man, the season's flying by. But like, we are into the back half of the regular season now. We are officially in it. It is all happening right now. I guess, if you were to identify, now that we've got, I think, a solid sample size of basically at least 5 games for each team, is there a team that jumps out to you that has overachieved your expectations, a team that maybe so far has surprised you to this point in the season, as we, of course, now enter probably the games that matter even more?
Wow. I'm kind of reaching back through the recesses of my mind here, which could go back, a lot. And in thinking about it, I guess maybe what has captured my attention as much as anything is not necessarily who has stepped up, but maybe, and it's not a regression per se, but who has appeared more human. Mm-hmm. And that's largely been in 5A, Highland Park we've talked about in D1, and now we're kind of seeing some human element, I guess, enter into the equation for Aledo.
True.
And being pushed by Midlothian the way they were, and it getting into overtime. I think those two probably, it comes to mind. And yet, by the way, Highland Park's one loss to a really good team that's certainly capable of winning the whole thing, and the Scots haven't let it stop them otherwise since. So, as we've been saying all along, you and I both, let's not kick dirt on Randy Allen's team just yet. There's a ways to go in all of this. But seeing what Frisco Lone Star did certainly, piqued everybody's interest, and probably just the mere fact that Highland Park proved human enough to suffer a loss, and seeing Aledo being pushed more than perhaps otherwise, maybe those things kind of come to mind as much as anything.
Yeah, I would say that you're right. I would say that maybe the field has maybe caught up to the favorites. Not maybe, in the case of Highland Park, maybe they're no longer the favorite, but I would say that Aledo is still the favorite in 5A Division 2, but maybe the field has caught up to them. I want to go back to one game because I want to talk a lot about the upcoming week, but I want to go back to one game that obviously we were very much paying attention to last week, which was Carthage and Pleasant Grove. Carthage goes on the road, knocks off Pleasant Grove 35-14. Really impressive victory for them, especially on the road. Outscore them 28-7 in the second half. Does that tell you more about Carthage or more about Pleasant Grove? I guess, what are your takeaways, knowing full well that these two teams are splitting? They're not going to see each other again, except perhaps back-to-back at AT&T Stadium if they were playing in state championship games. But I'm interested, with a game like that, in a massive clash with that kind of result, where it is the bigger team winning, what are your overall takeaways from a game like that?
I thought about that this week, and I put it in the same category that I put, and Ashley can jump in on this since she was there. I put it in the same category as Carroll and Geyer, and I put it in the exact same category that I'm placing the big be-all, end-all down in these parts this week, Lake Travis and Westlake this week, and that it's two big, heavyweight slobber knockers who go at it, and play in what I kind of look at it as almost like a midseason bowl game that you come away from it knowing, as Todd Dodge told me this morning, where you're being exposed and what you need to gear up. He said it is a fabulous measuring tool for what they need to do down the stretch of the regular season and getting ready for the playoffs. Oh yeah, there's the in the case of Carroll Geyer and in Westlake, Lake Travis, there's that thing about hardware of a district championship, and there's a great deal of pride down here. Westlake, had lost 10 in a row to Lake Travis before winning the last two. So there's all of that stuff, all of that pathos that goes along with it. But in terms of the nuts and bolts and what it means in the grand scale of the 6-week run to crowning state champions, these 3 games, the one you just mentioned last week with Carthage Pleasant Grove, and also last week with Carroll Geyer, and also with Westlake Lake Travis, are standalone games that give each side a scouting report on where they're coming up short and their tools of what they can have going forward, because as we know in the case of both of those 6As, they're going their separate ways. They're not going to see each other anymore the rest of the year unless it's, as you point out, Tep, just kind of waving hi to one another as one comes off the field following one game at AT&T and the other's getting ready to tee up in the other one. That's the only way they cross paths anymore the rest of the way. So it's kind of like a bowl game, really, and it gives you an opportunity to draw your conclusions from it and where you got to have going forward.
It's a really interesting way to put it. It's Craig Way, the Texas Football Hall of Famer, joins us every week here on Texas Football Today. Get involved in the conversation, #TF Today. All right, you mentioned it. We might as well talk about the game going on down there in Austin. I guess there are some games that are going on. I'm of course talking about LBJ and Dripping Springs. Huge game down there in Austin.
Even Stony Point Vista Ridge is big.
That is kind of interesting, because obviously I'm sure down there, Lake Travis and Westlake is the game. It's the game that's sucking up all the oxygen in the room. It's a really good week in Austin, actually. I think it's a really deep, interesting week of games down there in the Austin area. But we would be remiss if we didn't ask you about Lake Travis and Westlake. I know you talk with both coaches, and you got your finger close to the pulse of this game. I'm interested, kind of, in the vibe around this game this year, because I feel like this is a Lake Travis team that I think has gotten better since week 1, but has still got some work to do. And it's a Westlake team that, if it's possible to be Austin Westlake and be undefeated and fly under the radar, they have. The other interesting element to this is that this is the first time, we're talking about Westlake riding a winning streak for the first time in umpteen years. Does it feel like this is there's a different aura around this game this year, or is it's Westlake and Lake Travis yet again?
I think the answer is somewhere in between, because of what I just laid out in terms of the fact everybody knows they're going to go their different routes. There's no chance of meeting in a quarterfinal rematch as they did 3 years ago at DKR, where they had 35,000 sitting in the rain, and Westlake couldn't do anything about it with Sam Ellinger on the sidelines, and Lake Travis got the win, and Lake Travis was en route. They were a powerhouse to winning a state title that year. But I will say this, the emotion and the concentration and all of that stuff is still going. Here's an example. On my show this morning, I spent about 40 minutes on Westlake Lake Travis. I had Todd Dodge in studio for 25 of those minutes, and we talked about a lot of different things. And all those kinds of. We also talked quite a bit, Ashley, by the way, about him being on the sidelines for South Lake Carroll and Denton Shire, and he said he was far more nervous at that game than he has been in any game as he remarked as a head coach at Carroll or Westlake, because he said you're watching your son and you want him to do well.
Yeah, Riley was sweating, so.
Yeah, exactly. So I spent about 40 minutes of my show, of an hour show, talking about that. Now, 15 of the remaining 20 minutes I spent about what's going on in Mount Vernon. and laying it all out and all that stuff. It's been, and we were all texting one another last night with the things that were happening and the reports and all that kind of stuff and where it's going to go from here, and the SEC getting involved in the UIL with regard to the two kids' eligibility and so on and so on and so forth. And I made the remark that in terms of a story statewide, the drama that is unfolding with regard to Mount Vernon has now taken statewide attention away from the game that would be Westlake Lake Travis. I said there was a lot of statewide interest in Westlake Lake Travis. I said, but in terms of a story right now, looking at it on the major dailies across the state, this thing going on in Mount Vernon is now kind of become the story. Angry texter immediately texted and said, Mount Vernon's game against Jefferson there's no way that's a bigger game than Lake Travis Westlake. And I said, I didn't even mention Jefferson yet. I wasn't talking about the game. I was talking about the story. But the point of all of that is to show how this game still means an incredible amount to a lot of people, even though the two teams will go their separate ways. And to your point, Tep, Lake Travis has improved a bit, but Hank Carter will tell you he's not quite happy where they were. They were 42-7 at the half on Lehman last week, and he thought they were incredibly sloppy on defense. So he's challenged them to be ready for this Westlake group that, if you look at their three-headed monster at quarterback, with Kirkland Michaud and also Kate Klubnik and then Drew Willoughby, none of their individual numbers are going to impress you. Right. None of them. Only one of the three has rushed for over 100 yards total in the season. That's Klubnik. Only one of the three has thrown for over 700 yards, and that's Michaud. But you add the passing numbers together, and they're really impressive. They're thrown for about 1,600 yards, I think 19 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. They're completing 74% of their passes. So it gives Lake Travis's defense easily its toughest test. And then Westlake's defense, which has been crushing people and grinding them into a fine powder, is definitely going to be tested, I think. I will say this. Hudson Card has been at his best against some lesser opponents this season and wasn't at his best in the loss to Arlington Martin, even against Timberview. That said, in the last 3 games, he's completing passes at an incredible percentage. He's thrown for nearly 700 yards in the last 3 ball games and run for a touchdown. He's thrown for 8 touchdowns with no interceptions. So we're going to find out. We'll find out which one has made the biggest strides when the two sides of all of that collide on Friday.
One last question for Craig Way, the Texas High School Football Hall of Famer on Texas Football Today. Going to give you a multiple choice question, a choice of 3 games. Of course, we're leaving out Lake Travis and Westlake. I think that is consensus. No worse than a top 2 game in the state this week. No worse. So I'll give you 3 other games across the state, 3 different regions of the state too, and you got to pick one that you're most interested in. We can go to San Antonio for Brandeis versus O'Connor. We can go to Rosenberg for Lamar Consolidated against A&M Consolidated, or, and this is my wild card, we'll go to El Paso, and we'll talk about El Paso Americas and El Paso Franklin. Which one of the 3 are you picking?
Well, I do like that one in El Paso, and I'm really glad, as you were, to learn from our producer for High School Scoreboard Live that we're going to get the highlights on that subject. Yes. But I would say probably I'm going to lean toward the Battle of the Consols. Lamar against A&M Consolidated. I think that's got all manner of intrigue, and I might add, 2 teams that can, and you pointed this out when you were on my show on Monday, 2 teams that can fall into that category of legitimate threat to the aforementioned, suddenly more human-looking Alito run in 5AD2. So I would probably lean toward that one a little more than the other, I think, than the others. That would probably capture my attention quite a bit.
He is Craig Way. He's a Texas High School Football Hall of Famer. Of course, you can see his fine work on Fox Sports Southwest on Friday nights, where he will be back in his chair where he belongs. And then, of course, Listen to him on the Horn in Austin every weekday, and make sure you tune into the Call of Texas and OU on Saturday. I guess there is a college football game on Saturday of some note down there. So Craig, appreciate it, my friend, and I will see you on Friday, where I'm sure you will be gearing up to head to the Cotton Bowl.
I'll leave you with this. I opened my show Monday morning going, all right, clear the deck. There's been all this run-up, and now we get ready for the big game that everybody in this town is talking of. And when we get into Westlake and Lake Travis, and then I stopped and I said, oh, you meant that other game. So, yeah, I mean, in these parts, both games are almost on equal billing this week.
It's a big week in Austin, and Craig Way is going to be all over it. Craig, appreciate your time, my friend. I'll see you on Friday.
You bet, Jeff. See you.
There he goes. Craig Way, the Texas High School Football Hall of Famer, joins us every Tuesday normally on Texas Football Today, but he had to bump it because he had a meeting yesterday, and so we had him on Wednesday. So a little Wednesday treat for you.
And it is Wednesday. We do know that now.
Today is, in fact, Wednesday.
See, okay, if there is one reason why I could get like a kind of pass for not knowing what day it was, it's probably because it's not Tuesdays. Remember that? Do you not remember that? I think it was Brent who said that we should call Tuesday, like instead of saying Tuesdays with Craig, we should call it Tuesdays.
You know, Brent says a lot of things that we shouldn't listen to.
I like that one.